Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Circular Supply Chain and Drive for Sustainability panel that we have here at AWS reInvent. My name is Christine Liu. I'm a managing director at Accenture, and I look after our blockchain and identity and biometrics business in Accenture.
And I'm Leandro Nunes. I'm Vice President of Product Development and Innovation in MasterCard, more specifically in the MasterCard Labs, where we're also exploring blockchain initiatives and AI and other initiatives there. Not only related to payments, please don't think that it's going to be like a credit card presentation here. It's MasterCard beyond plastic at this point.
So, we see as consumers, I just had lunch. I don't know about you guys. I hope you guys also had a bit of lunch. As consumers, we see we eat every day. We eat, we drink, we consume. There's everything from furniture to eggs that you can see on the screen. In Europe alone, 29 million tons of dairy is wasted every year. And that's a staggering amount of milk, cheese, and yogurt, right? That's 574 billion equivalent of eggs. I can't even count that, how many zeros that might be. And thinking through, what this means in terms of the food supply chain, there's also things like the inequality in food supply chain. So over 90% of people working in the seafood industry, and Leandro can talk a little bit more about that later on, they don't have enough to eat. Thinking about how they actually work, they fish, they farm, but they themselves don't have enough to eat. And of those, a lot of them are women. And my personal course is, and how we started the Circular Supply Chain Initiative, is thinking through, when we see all of the burning of the rainforests, especially in Brazil, in Asia, all of these places, that there are many, many of the species, animals, you can see orangutans here, the fauna being actually burnt down. Their homes are lost. They're killed. They're going to be extinct. And thinking through, all of that, because all of the base of the pyramid, the farmers, the whatnot of the world, is actually going to be gone. And they need to eat. People who are farming are not bad people. The smallholders are not bad people, but they need to eat. They need to be able to survive. They need to feed their families, get healthcare, get education. They need to be able to do that themselves. So they don't want to burn things down, so how can we change some of that incentives, which we'll go into? And thinking through how we actually started doing some of this is, I drink coffee every morning. I was saying earlier on an interview, I drink about 4 or 5 cups of coffee a day. It's probably a bit much. And every cup of coffee that I drink is a 1 square inch of rainforest destroyed. I certainly don't want to destroy some of the rainforests out there. I'm sure you guys don't either. Many of you, I assume, will have several cups of coffee today. Think of that impact. The people who grow those coffee beans. What damage does that do to your environment? Every morning that you have your cup of coffee. You don't want to damage your environment. Neither do I. Most likely, neither do the people who are growing those coffee beans. They just want to survive. And last year, I did a piece of work with the World Wildlife Fund in conjunction with the Moore Foundation around tracing the supply chain, using the feasibility of blockchain technologies, which is, of course, a huge topic, and huge innovation technology. And this is talking about how to use blockchain in food supply chain specifically. Is it feasible for Brazilian beef, soya, tuna, and Thai shrimps, and thinking through what that could mean, how could that change lives. And it's not just about tracing the product, but it's also through the supply chain, thinking about the forced labor, the abuse in things like human rights, the issues of environmental impact from feedstock all the way down to how we consume the fish. A huge amount of seafood products are mislabeled. What is actually white fish? There's no such thing. It's a made-up term. So thinking through, as consumers, when you eat white fish, what does that mean? Where does that actually really come from? And imagine a new generation, our consumers today, and more so, millennials, the generations after, the generations that haven't even been created yet. Today, with all of the climate discussions, all of the things around better, greater sustainability, the call for action, a new generation of fair trade can be done now. You know, I love this statistic that we're showing on screen here. Around 500 crowns of coffee, of fair trade organic coffees, gets around paid for the farmer for $1.30 per pound. That's $700 a year, but that can retail for at least 20 bucks. Your single origin coffee, is it really single origin that you drink in the morning? How does it impact the base of the pyramid? And with all these questions, we often feel as consumers, and at least I do, that there's little trust. How do I know it's really real, right? How do I know this product is really what it says it is? How do I know it's really fair trade? How do I know? There is very, very little trust and transparency out there in the market. But we are changing. We, all as consumers, are changing the way we consume. And more and more so with the younger generation, that's the social consciousness of consumer is really changing and demanding change to the corporates. I think Deandra and I were on a panel earlier this year.
Yep.
I think something like 86% of that conference said they will pay more for a more sustainable product. That's a huge amount of people, and this was in New York. And 73% here says that they will actively switch to a brand that's got more of a social purpose. And for those of you that use social media, you can see this. If you look at Instagram feeds, if you look at a lot of what media, and Amazon is a great example of that to show, hey, you know, which brands are doing what, and you can search all of these things today. Transparency and authenticity is not just in food, but everything from luxury items, mining, to all sorts of different areas. $4 billion has been invested in food traceability in technologies alone in North America. Some really staggering statistics. Food for health, of course, wellness, amongst other things. Food with a function, according to Google food search, is a huge trend. And people are thinking more and more about where food comes from, where production comes from. How do we trust all of these products? And a third of US consumers rank trust as their top 3 purchase drivers. So how are we going to help to change the incentives of all of these things to help the consumers consume in a more responsible way?
Yeah, and when you see this, and we ask, okay, so how can we really create some practical, situations, because we've been in blockchain for a while, and was a lot of a concept, and blockchain is going to save the world, right? All these things, and we started saying, okay, so let's give a try, let's test and learn that, and that's what we've been doing. And now we can tell we have things in production, we have things that is really real, and MasterCard just did in a partnership with the food supply chain, seafood traceability. So that means in the supermarkets in the States, we're going to have shrimp come from Malaysia, Mexico, tuna come from any place in the world, being tracked the whole from the fisherman community to get it to the shelves of the supermarkets, and there will be a QR code that consumers can check it. Is it only good for the consumers? Not only for that. Just imagine the whole supply chain. Imagine a fisherman community that doesn't even know how they're going to get paid, for example. They don't know how profitable can be their business if they can help with the traceability. Imagine the supplier, the buyers who get that and have to bring it here. They don't have the visibility of the supply chain. And from the brand side of it, that how if you're in a big brand, right, or you've been in a supermarket and you say this is tuna, if you don't have the whole visibility, you don't trust if that is really what you're getting. So brands are saying, I need to have this visibility. I need to create the transparency. So we are creating business models that I'm going to talk about this later, that it's in production. It's now. It's happening. We are getting, the seafood is the first one example for that, and they're going to scan it. They're going to see where it comes from. And of course, that particular product would have a premium. Right? Brands can say, now that I know where it comes from, how fresh this is, I can charge it a premium, and that is the circular supply chain. That it goes back to the community. And they see, well, it makes all sense to be part of it because I can get benefit from it. It's not only big guys getting that. It's not big brands saying, hey, I demand you to do that, but we are doing something to the sourcing side of the supply chain as well. Do you want to, yes. Let's get a...
So what is actually circular supply chain, right? We gave a lot of context in terms of why. So we'll show you a video, and hopefully the sound will work.
Give some action, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
The global value in green trade is rising in political and economic importance, topping $2 trillion a year. 2/3 of global consumers are willing to pay more for sustainable goods. Nevertheless, today's economic and social models can still exacerbate inequalities, encourage waste, and increase threats to our environment and health. That's partly because the small producers at the beginning of the sustainable supply chain get a mere sliver of the premium price paid for their goods. What if we could empower consumers to directly reward small-scale suppliers around the world that are committed to following sustainable practices? Imagine the impact if more people could fully participate in the growing value of the green economy. With a powerful combination of blockchain, digital identity, and payments technologies, we believe this is possible and imperative. Here's how it works. Using an app on their phone, a producer, in this case a coffee farmer, creates a profile. At his cooperative, his biometrics and photo for facial recognition are securely captured and verified. Several steps are taken to create his unique identifier using multiple security protocols. This identifier is then recorded on the blockchain, which acts as an index with links to all applicable data, including things like his payment details, so he can receive tips, or his farm's inspection history and organic certifications. This makes it easy to locate, access, and share information without the farmer's personal data being stored on the blockchain. The farmer is always in control of their data, determining which information is part of their public profile or what details will be linked to a particular product as it moves through the supply chain. He can also use the app as a management tool to keep track of product registrations, check his tip balance, renew certifications, and prepare a harvest for shipment. When a shipment is ready and registered, a barcode is automatically generated, embedding information about the coffee, the farmer, and his farm, like its organic certification. These details, and each step the shipment takes along the journey, are traceable as it moves across the supply chain, from farmers to processors to grocery store shelves, and finally to end consumers, where a simple scan not only tells the story of their sustainably sourced coffee and the farmers that grew it, but empowers them to say thank you via a secure tip. The benefit is a circular supply chain that goes beyond where it started and creates a closer connection between consumers and small growers. The hope is, by aligning incentives, we can empower an inclusive economy that encourages the actions to continue to mitigate environmental impact. Accenture has developed this capability, but it's just a start. We invite you to join us as we collaborate to build a more sustainable and inclusive world.
So, why? Right? Why did we do some of this? And and really this is around, as we go into a more circular economy, something that the World Economic Forum talks about in terms of the fourth industrial revolution that is coming. And not just because of the sort of green trade, the global trend around things like sustainability, the need for trust and transparency in the supply chain, for sustainable practices. And it's also about empowering the people. And very often I hear a lot of I do quite a lot of work with some of the farmers, and they say, well, digital is supposed to be coming to agriculture. When is it actually going to happen? And a lot of farmers say, well, I don't understand, how is this going to impact me? Why is it relevant to me, this digital? Because they're dealing with livestock, they're dealing with plants. How is it going to help? And very often we hear about some of the issues around things like financial inclusion, which I'll pass over to Leandro to talk a little bit about. And in terms of understanding how this digital and technology is going to help them transform their lives. And part of the reason is we thought, as I went through the journey of thinking, my profession is dealing with blockchain, dealing with biometrics, identity, so on and so forth. How can some of this innovation that all of us here generate, how can that help those that are really in need of better technology, better innovations to change their lives? So that's really where some of that sort of come from, and the key value around sort of proving authenticity, the provenance of products, reducing waste. I mean, think of all of the waste that we started off with. And of course, empowering those people, empowering the base of the pyramid, farmers, suppliers, furniture makers, seamstress, people that manufacture cotton. I mean, fashion in itself is a huge issue in terms of pollution, and thinking through how can that all of that tie together to have a fairer economy. Good sustainable practices can also be really good businesses. And that's something that we strongly believe in. And of course, over to you around things like, financial inclusion. I know it's a huge MasterCard agenda.
It is. And again, not about, the reason I like that video is because it's not about only the traceability, not about just, the tip. It's much more than that. You see there are all the players over there, all the stakeholders being part of this, that is part of the supply chain, get a benefit. Now, if you talk a little about the financial inclusion, that's been huge for us at MasterCard, and you see that a lot of opportunities to do something away just beyond making money, right? It really, we have something we call MasterCard Farmer Network. If you guys can Google this later, you can see we have over 2,000 farmers already there. And basically what we do is, for the places that they have devices, we have a mobile payment solution for them that it can go together with the traceability that they are giving the product. They know they're going to receive through their devices. And you say, but some places they don't have phones handy. That's cases we have prepaid cards. And the benefit of having this is, we are talking about communities, sometimes they don't have even bank accounts. They deal with cash all the time, and that helps them to build their credit score, to build their credit history, and then they start to have access to leasings, and they can buy stuff, and they can even use this as part of their business. So we are coming from a situation where I say, in Madagascar, that they're getting vanilla, giving vanilla to the buyers. They don't even know when they're gonna get the money. They don't even know how much they're gonna get from the buyers. From a point now that they have average price, they can forecast how much they're gonna get, and they start to get that through their prepaid cards, or through the telecom, through the money from the device. And by doing that, they build their credit score, that they now go to the banks to get the loans, to get the harvest. The banks know who they are, so they get the lower interesting rate, and that helps their business. So the ones that are there as part of this solution are saying, oh, I see benefit of it. The benefit is that can improve my business, that I can keep my family in the agriculture. I don't need to move them to the big cities, because there is a sustainable, profitable business here if I do the right thing. So they learn, our implementation partners, they go there, they teach them what they should do. They even bring instructions on how they really grow organic products. So what is the regulation? Even knowing if you're in Africa or in Asia, wherever you are, our partners come with the regulation that you can see in Europe, the big markets, right? Europe, North America, and they say, look, this is what you need to do on your end, that then you can get into new market in those places because now you're doing the right thing. So it's again, we are bringing this financial inclusion. It's obviously it's super for the farmers, but also we help them with their business. It's not only is a charity thing only. It's not that. It's the fact there is a business involved with that. And the beauty of it is that we are not doing that alone. We have partners, right? You with the Mercy Corps, we have partners who help with that. Why? The more that we drink coffee, I don't, but I do other stuff. The more that you drink coffee, the more that we eat, and the more we worry about this. We don't speak the food language or the industry language, logistics, transportation. This is very particular, right? So we use partners to go and tell us, so these are the pain points you have. This is how we're going to address that. So we provide the rails, we provide the infrastructure, we provide the services that they need, and the partners are the front end. They are the ones that go there and getting people on board, see the situation, know the situation, and know how to address these pain points. So if one of you here, one of those have a solution or working specifically in one industry and see that's an opportunity for you, and you don't want to spend a lot of money to scalability because we know how to do. We are everywhere in the world. We can help with that. So think about it. So you probably have a niche in your own business that you can expand because you can partner with big companies that can bring what we have the best, which is provide the rails, provide the back end, provide the consultancy we need and the infrastructure like AWS does to grow, because you know what needs to be done, because you're there, you understand the industry much more than us. So that's the way it works for us. That's the advantage of having the circular supply chain, is what you can bring to the whole ecosystem.
And a little bit about sort of how it works, and interesting. This is really so I started the idea 2 years ago at a meeting, and I actually drew. This is an exact picture that is much prettier here than the one I drew on a whiteboard 2 years ago. But it hasn't changed, and it came from sort of the idea of collaboration with MasterCard. We do a lot of the work on biometrics together and thinking about biometrics payment and how exactly, as Leandro just said, around things like financial inclusion, for those that don't necessarily have access to a bank account, and they need to have an identity. They need to be able to receive payments, but that they get the payment, they themselves, the real person. Very often, and I mentioned just now in the work that we did with the Moore Foundation and WWF, that some of the times in these kind of, in some of the supply chain for food, there is a lot of things like human trafficking. There's forced labor. That sometimes the head of household, very often men, will get all of the money. The women who are working don't get any of the funds, and therefore the rest of the family suffer. So in thinking of how we can use payments, innovation in payments such as the biometric on-card capability that MasterCard has, and thinking through that, well, if the people get paid via this mechanism, doesn't matter that if they drop the card, doesn't matter if it's only them that can get the money. And that is truly transformative in terms of the inclusion and human empowerment that can bring. So how does this work? Let's say a farmer plants a coffee crop without cutting down forest. They harvest the crop, so say it's coffee, using the same example, and send this up through the supply chain. So for example, the transportation logistics provider comes, scans the code that this is my 3 tons of coffee, 300 kilos coffee, whatever it is. And an identity, as you saw earlier on in the video, the farmer gets issued an identity by, say, their local cooperative, could be by their processor, depending on different supply chain, will have a completely different model. But why is an identity important? It surprised me in the sense that when I looked into this field, that most supply chain don't think of the people. They think of the goods. They think of the companies, but they don't think of the people. But in order to change incentives, in order for people to not burn down, say, the rainforest, to not have to manage your supply chain of labor supply, to ensure that there's no forced labor, for example, you need to know who those people are. You need to change the incentive for those people in order for real impact to take place. If we don't provide and change the incentives for those people, it's not going to change. So how do we do that? In order to do that, we need to know who they are. And it might not be you and me knowing who they are, but the cooperatives, the manufacturing, all of up and down through the supply chain, we need to be able to know who are the people. Knowing the people change lives. And therefore, we started off with an identity. And very often, folks that are at the base of the pyramid, they are not recognized in the official system. So maybe they don't necessarily interact with the government, they might not be very good governments, and they might not want to interact with the governments. Very often when in working with the sort of local population, they understand that a ID from their local cooperative might go a long way. They might be able to use the ID to actually enroll their children into school, get healthcare, because it shows that they actually have a job. They actually will have a production crop that can bring money. They will be able to get things like microfinancing, get payments, but they lack that identity to be able to have access to those services. So we started off with an identity. And as they go up the supply chain through sending their crops, for example, getting collected, imagine each and every single step, they send over the data through the app that you saw earlier, perhaps a QR code is scanned, whatever that process might be in the existing supply chain, try not to change it too much, because it's, a lot of change is not always, it's very difficult to manage, especially sort of in remote places where there is shrimp farming in the middle of sort of island in the Pacific, for example. It's going to be difficult. So thinking through, as it goes through from cooperative to large manufacturers, processes, those are easier, because then you can trace the crop, trace where it comes from, the batches, and then thinking through also things like when you need to mix products, how does all that happen? And we showed some of that in the video, thinking through, right, this particular batch of coffee is mixed with, say, Leandro's crop, is mixed with my crop, and together, what does that mean? Very often, we use an example like granola bar. There's usually about 65 different ingredients in there. So where does it come from different places, and be able to manage all of that. And then as the coffee is delivered to the supermarkets, say Whole Foods, or Amazon Fresh, what happens? When I go and order on Amazon Fresh, hey, I really like this, and it gets delivered to my home through my Amazon Prime app, which I use continuously, like most of you here. And I scan, wow, I bought my single origin coffee, I'm really happy with it. It says sustainable, it says Rainforest Alliance, and it says fair trade, because I clearly pay quite a lot for my coffee. But I want to be a responsible consumer, right? So I scan my coffee, bag of coffee with the QR code that you saw. And as I look at the QR code, I can see, as you saw on the video earlier, where it came from. At which point did it pass through supply chain? If you involve some of the IoT components, did it go through, was it roasted in the right temperature, for example, if I'm a coffee snob? And was it really stored in the right way? If it's seafood, did it go through the right quarantine, the right checks? Was it stored all the way at the same level of temperature? If you're a sushi chef, you might really care about that. And going through all of that, then as I go through my bag of coffee, and I can see, hey, it really went through all of the steps, and it really came from that community or that farmer. It really is single origin. I can say, well, thank you. I can tip. I can send money. Might be sending this to a community. I might be sending this to an individual. But I know then, because of his identity, or their identity, there is a real reason that it's not going back through the supply chain. It's paying it forward. It's paying it back to the individual. And by leveraging the different capabilities that MasterCard has for things like biometric payments, whether it's mobile payments with things like selfie pay or the biometric on card capability, I know for sure they're going to be getting the money. It's not someone else. It's not some sort of middleman in the middle that sort of there's fraud and all of that sort of thing. I know. As a consumer, I put my money where my mouth really is. And that way, that is really the circular aspects of it and why identity really also matters in the whole the entire ecosystem. It starts with an identity, also ends with an identity, whether it's identity of the product, identity of the people, identity of the different companies, and so on. And as the other capabilities, of course, not just sort of identity and biometrics, and of course the biometrics needs to be used in a responsible manner. There's also the blockchain aspects of the supply chain, the biometrically enabled payments I talked about, and of course the digital transformation. If we can bring a small piece of the real digital economy to those at the base of the pyramid and help with some of the connectivity, enabling some of the equality and enabling them to have greater connectivity and use for digital, it could be transformative for their lives. So those are some of the capabilities that we bring together for circular supply chain. And then, different opportunities in terms of what this can bring. We use coffee as an example, and I hand over to Leandro to talk a little bit about seafood also.
Yeah, the supply chain in general has been a low-hanging fruit for opportunities in blockchain. If you think about, we don't want to go to the blockchain basics here, but the most interesting thing about blockchain is the fact that we can connect participants, right, and companies from different sizes and from different places, and they can just share what needs to be shared. And they don't need to be in a centralized database. They can trust because they can, it gets recorded, immutable recorded, let the ledgers there, so everybody has visibility of what's going on. Now, think about it. What is the main problem with this is the supply chain, right? The supply chains are the ones that nowadays are super fragmented, global, that comes from everywhere in the world, until you get to the destination. Like I said before, brands don't have the whole visibility of what's going on, and they start to say, oh, how can I guarantee that what I'm bringing to my consumers is necessarily what I want to, what I buy from my suppliers? So think about all of this is really supply chain. People talk a lot about cryptocurrency, all the things, but I really think for blockchain today in production, supply chain is there. We need it, right? We need it as a society. And in fact, they're the ones that are more in production I've seen for this 4 or 5 years I've been in blockchain. So specifically for this one, we have tomorrow, there are 1,000 pounds of shrimp in a container from Asia to the US. We have that IoT sensors over there. They are shipping this. We know the temperature that the shrimp is coming from this. If someone opened the container, we know what the container is. It's because we are trading this from different companies. They have deals like 25% of the way through, I can pay you something. If it goes to that ocean freight, I can pay you a little bit more until you get to the destination. The IoTs and all these things we have are helping us to understand where the container is. This container is like a huge amount of shrimp. When they get to the processing facilities, they clean this, they put in a small package, they serialize this package, and they send it to the supermarkets. So when you get there, that package comes from that container that has all this information I said, and we know exactly where they come from. Can be frozen, can be fresh, right? Depends on the product is, but you see how important this is from food that has a big chance of contamination, right? There's a freshness or being frozen for the whole journey is super important. So we are not talking about human beings saying, oh, this is okay. I see this container, nobody opened it. I see that temperature was okay. I see that fault. No, we are talking about being all automated in a way that we can tell this is the way it works. So it goes from, since the shrimp is caught, and we have partners now and communities that are not using engineers or anything to the boats. You just caught the shrimp naturally. And there are places, believe it or not, they broom the whole ocean, the bottom of the ocean, to get just shrimp. And the rest of the things that they have in the net just go away. So now we are making sure, first of all, these guys are doing the right thing. The shrimp has the sustainability that it is not damage anything in the environment. And then it goes to the next phase. It goes to the co-ops and passes through all this shipment until you get to the warehouses or to the processing facilities, and then these guys open this and becomes in a small package that goes to the supermarket and they put on the shelf. That's when we come and buy it. So it's a journey of a few days. It's happening now, and we have a huge visibility that now the suppliers are coming and say, look, hey brand, I can sell you something that I can tell where it comes from. So everybody wins because you have a better product that you're selling. The brand has the protection they needs. The consumer has what they want. And the fisherman community now have the financial inclusion I mentioned before. So this is the whole package. And this is when I say we need to create an incentive model that makes sense. This is what we're talking about. We are seeing the whole picture, the big picture of where the supply chain is. And that's why I think nowadays blockchain, IoT, circular initiatives are the low-hanging fruit, are the ones that it's easy to implement, doesn't need a regulation. Like, cryptocurrency is good, it's going to be there, but it's going to take a while to get regulated, to get done. This is not. This is it. This is, you can use it right now.
And a little bit about sort of things like IoT, and really that's part of what the circular supply chain and enhancement on a lot of that is, we use IoT devices all the time. You and I probably have Alexa at home doing different things. Our cars are increasingly being IoT driven. And then thinking of in the production environment, in farming, in manufacturing, those are really serious IoT capabilities in terms of factories, in terms of processing, what Leandro just mentioned around things like sensors, was the stored at the right temperature all the way through, whether it's IoT for business, from smart factory, precision farming, yield. I'm working with an NGO at the moment looking at seaweed. How much carbon does it suck in? Because the seaweed is a huge carbon sequester, and so if you sink the seaweed, then how much can you then use it for trading carbon? So, for example, IoT plays a huge part in that. And of course, working with AWS and some of the IoT capability with AWS that we can put on the cloud and share some of that data using blockchain, the enormous impact that could have globally around the accuracy of data sharing using blockchain, and things like just understanding, everything from here on the slide that we talk about things like IoT for governments, traffic congestion, weapons, understanding sort of supply chain for weapons, and how do you make sure that it can be tracked and tracked back to, the identity of the things. IoT for consumers, I mentioned, all of the things that, self-driving car, things like health devices. More and more we're seeing some of this, and all of this around things like IoT to farming. How do we enable some of those based on the pyramid farmer to be able to benefit from some of these capabilities, right? It doesn't need to be something complicated. It can be something just as simple as sensors and are able to report. And because blockchain, bad data goes in and never comes back out again. So the ability to have accurate information, and people often ask us in terms of, well, how do you first start putting that data in? How do you know it's right? How do we trust that data? And I think with some of those IoT capabilities and with some better data collection methods, and knowing that that device is really that device, and the information that came from that particular device, say, the geolocation of the device, we know that then it came from that particular, let's say, the logbook of that ship where it was, the temperature of that water, the temperature coming from the cold storage for those fish, then you know that's where it came from. That's what really the temperature is, and therefore the data that is shared, then the farmer knows that what they have insured, paid insurance for, should be lower because it's all the way through. You can keep the data, so then they don't have to spend so much money for things like insurance. Their premiums might be able to go down if the insurance company can see the data and say, hey, they're doing a good job. The auditors can see that, right, the goods have been intact and kept at the right temperature all along. Customs officer, that as they go through customs, they know that this is where the data comes from, that it hasn't been contaminated, there's no issues around things like disease or whatnot because the food has been contaminated and it really came from that place. Then they know with greater certainty. It's not necessarily trusting the person, it's then you're able to trust data that hasn't, you know that it hasn't been tampered with because you can do clever things with blockchain and with security controls to ensure the integrity of that data so that they know. And then therefore that brings benefit. Trust in that data enables greater trust in the ecosystem and the network. And that's sort of the power of what blockchain can bring, is that trusting that data. But it's not just about the blockchain aspect, it's about all layers of it. Trusting the person from an identity perspective, trusting the device in an IoT standpoint, and therefore trusting the data that it can bring, and then trusting the various entities along the supply chain to say that, to encourage better behavior. Because if you're able to track the data, share in a more transparent manner, then that hopefully will build incentives to generate better behavior, to be more transparent, say, right, I'm incentivized now as a farmer to become more sustainable, to actually keep up to date with my, say, my certification for organic, for fair trade, for so on, for Rainforest Alliance, so on and so forth, to be able to demonstrate that this stuff, getting audited, sending information through, is actually worth my while because I can get paid a premium benefit for some of this. And that's where some of the IoT and all of the sort of innovations in technology can bring about change. Some of the opportunities and benefits. Waste, of course, is a huge thing, not necessarily just at the base or pyramid level, but imagine in a supply chain environment where a lot of our supermarkets, hotels, it goes to waste. What if you can do trade promotions and say, right, this is coming, this warehouse has too much broccoli, and it can move to another warehouse quickly because you know that stuff is coming to waste. Move things around, able to target consumers for enhancing reputation, the green credentials, not just greenwashing, but real green credentials. And I think that every major CEO of the world, especially in manufacturing and in food, have commitments to the environment and sustainability. Let's make them real. And by, how can they demonstrate this? How can they, at their AGM, show their shareholders, this is real? That I can show this with real data, and it's not just greenwashing, this is real. Creating new channels. And with the things like the consumer app that you saw earlier, for consumers like myself, greater marketing. Targeted marketing. That's what I want to see. So Amazon can actually, and Whole Foods can sell me the things that are targeted at me because I want to have certified humane products, proven green products from artisanal providers, and so on and so forth. It's good for them. I build trust in them as a retailer, and they also trust that I'm actually going to spend more money because I care about these other things that I care about, and so on. And in terms of growth, efficiency, and shareholder value. And as we move into more of a stakeholder economy, as the chairman of World Economic Forum said yesterday, in terms of moving from shareholder economy to a stakeholder economy, and thinking through as where from businesses to environmental to child labor to sort of getting a more inclusive economy, to be able to do business in a different way, driving growth in a different manner. And of course, innovation. These are benefits that can be done, can be applied for all. And of course, things like social impact, financial inclusion, and ultimately, meeting the shareholders and the stakeholder objective and meeting the consumer demand. We, as consumers, demand better, demand more sustainable choices. And really, for us, we can drive some of the change. And hopefully, with some of that, and that's where the right set of incentives across a set of participants and the different opportunities and benefits that can bring. What else do you think? Am I missing something?
No, even if it's not necessarily physical product, just think about things that are really hard to track, needs to be tracked. The other day we were discussing healthcare claims. It's super, everything that you can track can be digitized. It doesn't need to be necessarily, something that physically there. That helps. All these benefits are going to be there. You reduce cost, the society gets the benefit, and it helps. We've been, there's so many different things nowadays that come into my office now. People say, oh, we have this idea to track that, because it doesn't really matter. It's completely industry agnostic at this point, right? As long as you give visibility, and that's why I say it's kept me busy this entire year with people come with new ideas, but if I can filter this as one common ground, is the fact that everybody needs to gain visibility and everybody needs to track and trace something. If it's digital or physical or money, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the industries need that.
And of course, and I'm going to leave 10 minutes for a Q&A, and some of here, of course, MasterCard here is our initial collaborators, and we launched the effort at Davos earlier this year, and there are a number of pilots that are already, I know there's some production capability, and a number of pilots that are already in the works. Mercy Corps is our NGO partner. Everledger is another partner that is actually primarily specializing in the metals and precious metals and gems space. That is very, very interesting in terms of what they do. And of course, AWS is a huge partner for supporting us in terms of all our capabilities. Data hosted on AWS, and I think as we move forward into thinking how we are able to share data in the cloud, able to leverage blockchain, biometrics, payments, identity, so on and so forth. Please come and join us. And we have a Lego city for those that have in the exec summit. Actually, we have built a whole Lego city that demonstrates how all of this works, and it's very cool. It's very cute. I wish I built it myself. It was, but it's really, really cool to see it working. So for those that can access the exec summit, please go and have a look. If nothing else, it's just to show your kids. It has a whole train thing going around, and it's super cool. We saw it this morning. It's great. So any questions?
No questions, please. Sure.
Sure.
How do you do outreach? So the program that you were talking about, like the farmers, to get them financial services. So how do you do outreach to that kind of audience? How do you market that offering?
So great question. So your question is, just to repeat it out here, so is how we outreach those communities of farmers to get the financial inclusion, how we do that. So great. So we usually work with implementation partners. There's usually with small companies, they have access to this. So Mercy Corp, for example, is one of them. They have access to the community. They know what they need, and they facilitate the communication with us. It's hard to believe. I imagine if you raise this question that MasterCard would go to a farm in Colombia, for example, and you do what we did with the coffee over there. But the big brands, so the coffee now we have in a Starbucks, it comes from Colombia, passed through a big company. They know what the needs are. So this we call implementation partners. They facilitate the conversation, and we go there eventually, and we understand what the pain points are. See, for the Colombia one, there wouldn't make any sense to have phones because they were part of some region that the service doesn't work well. So we use the prepaid cards, and just to give a practical idea, they put the ATMs in the co-ops over there. They can just cash out money, or they can use the prepaid cards in the market and do these things. So it's just pretty cool. I mean, they love it because, you know, plus sometimes it's not that super safe place. So they don't want you to carry cash all the time. So you got this. And by the way, I have to say, they don't pay for it. Don't think of, whoa, we're going to give cards for these guys and start to charge them fee. Fee is zero for farmers. They don't pay to get part of the network. This is not the part of the supply chain they're going to pay. This is all about adoption. We need to get them on board. Does that answer? No more question? Please.
How to deal with international shipping and waiting and such?
Sure. Actually, great question in terms of we also have several pilots in bill of lading. We will have partners depending on which supply chain. You will have very different shipping partners and how from the manufacturers or the processes to whether the importers or exporters are. So logistics and freight are definitely part of the ecosystem, and we didn't sort of show it as some of the slides, but the bill of lading components, customs, freight, logistics, all of those are critical partners because they are the people who need to go from, you know, whether it's logistics that are just from shipping coffee from one farm to the processing plant, all the way to all of the different shipping partners. And one of our earlier pilots was actually on bill of lading specifically for actually beer. For a separate pilot. So in terms of looking at using blockchain and reducing the amount of data fields that you would need for bill of lading, because typically you have something, I may be getting this wrong, but you know, something like 38 data fields, and in the pilot that we did with a major shipping company and a manufacturer as well as a customs entity, we managed to reduce to just they only needed to share something like 7 or 8 data fields. So in terms of data reconciliation, in terms of efficiency, was absolutely phenomenal to be able to leverage something like blockchain. Those are the data fields that you would use. And the same thing that in this space is to actually get the right big partners together to say, right, we need these 10 data fields in the supply chain and share that data, and logistics would definitely be one of the people.
One of them for the international is always port, ship lines, and terminals. These are the ones that necessarily going to be there, and they have one of their pain points, and you try to get an incentive for them is the amount of paperwork and manual bureaucracy they have. So one of these things we do is digitize the documents as well. That helps them to clear things faster from the customs and some of them are seeing this as an opportunity to create a differentiator from a port to the other. And it's a big competition. I learned that with this. So they competed, among themselves in this. So this is an opportunity for them to bring us different services also to these companies. We like that. Insurance companies like that a lot because they gain visibility. They gain the whole visibility. And insurance is a big cost in this whole process when you get an international shipment. So automatically, insurance companies are one of the stakeholders as well. So it's kind of like I said, it's a network effect. We start with a part of it, and it comes like others because they see benefit. So something that is related to food, for example, becomes an international shipment, which is a completely different industry, and you have to deal with different stakeholders. But those are the ones that we learn more.
Sure.
So my question is about like other types of products. So you mentioned a lot like coffee beans, and that's like one thing. Yeah. What about products that have a lot of different ingredients, like a baking soda?
Oh yeah.
All those types of stuff?
Okay. If you want to.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead. Yeah. So.
Granola bar is the one that I use as an
Vanilla,
example. I think every product, every supply chain will be slightly different. And something that has a lot of components, start somewhere. Start with 1 or 2 components that are relatively easy. So for example, and things that are not too mixed. So, where there's a lot of stuff that's mixed together, sometimes it can get quite complicated. And then it will really be up to sort of some of the brands. So using a granola bar, for example, it will be working with some of the brands. Do you actually want to show that much? Because it's very confusing. Or which bit at what level do you want to show? And some of them maybe you don't show the farmer themselves, you show a community, or you show 3 communities. So that user experience aspect is just critically important to understand what is relevant for the consumer, how much data you want to show without getting it a bit overwhelming, to then starting somewhere that it actually makes sense. Choosing the right product is also important because why we use things like coffee, cacao, milk, those are, coffee is a more premium product that have a following. So understanding, the aspects of culture, what would really make sense to those type of consumers, are they more likely to pay more for this product and be more, the kind of consumers that care about sustainability a little bit more, then those are the sort of products we start as phase 1 to demonstrate the value that, hey, to the big brands, this is really, you've got legs, people are really interested. And then we can go into a little bit more of the complex product as it gets wider adoption and development.
Yeah, as it's approaching 5 p.m., I can give instead of coffee now, we can talk about beverage. So vodka, for example. We are, to your point, when I first spoke to vodka, the big brand, they said, well, I don't need this because we have control of the whole farmers, because their 4th generation work with us for over 100 years. We are good. But now they have vodka, they put strawberries, lime, and the fragrance that they have there, they completely lost control of where it comes from. And we are talking about over 100 different fragrances that they come from, sometimes Africa, Asia, and you go to those places. So for these communities are completely different ones than you have. They had control before. And now for them, it's easy to start with those ones and bring them on board. So I don't pitch saying everybody needs this. It's how the visibility. So they have visibility of this piece, as I said, so let's not touch it. If you are happy with this way, good. But tell me what are your pain points? So this fragrance that comes from Africa, Asia, I have no idea in my community that I don't know how to take care of them. And it's important for them to keep them there, right? Because they need the raw material. So that's when we start to tackle from this perspective. So it's a different, not coffee, better. At least vodka I drink, coffee I don't.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. I think I would give you 1 minute and 50 seconds back. And thank you very much. And thank you for being a very interactive audience. And if you have any other questions, let us know. And we're around.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.